Thank you so much, you lovely, discerning people. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I am DB, welcome to another ranking video, and today we'll be talking about a Hollywood legend, famous for his hilarious comedies, his biting satires, and his captivating film noirs. A man with countless accolades to his name, as well as an arsenal of talented Academy Award-winning actors at his disposal. I am of course talking about the great writer-director, Billy Wilder. I have watched every single one of his 26 directorial efforts, and now I'm gonna rank them all. Two things before we start. First, this is my list. It's not an objective list, it's just my opinion. Do not take my words as gospel. And second, because I know people are going to comment on this, I am very much aware that Billy Wilder co-wrote all of his films. But for the purposes of pacing, when I talk about the writing, I'll be referring to Wilder only. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's do this. This is every single Billy Wilder directed film ranked from worst to best. Number 26. Mauvaise graine. Bad seed in English, okay? It's quite appropriate we should start our ranking at the beginning, Billy Wilder's directorial debut. And it's more bizarre than anything, really. Before I explain why, I have a little riddle for you all. What do Billy Wilder and James Cameron have in common? Well, they're both highly successful and revered directors, with plenty of great films to their name, but both of their directorial debuts, their first films, aren't only their worst ones by far, they're also distinct for how disconnected they feel from the latter higher quality output their directors are known for. That's right, Bad Seed is Billy Wilder's Piranha 2: The Spawning. The story behind the film is much more interesting than the film itself. Not only is the film disconnected stylistically from Wilder's later work, it's also disconnected by literal time and space. Billy Wilder, who started out as a screenwriter in Germany, directed his first feature in France in 1934, after leaving Germany on account of Hitler's rise to power. He then proceeded to move to the States and continue writing scripts, only directing his sophomore feature nearly a decade later in Hollywood. So if Bad Seed barely feels like a Billy Wilder movie to you, this is why. All of this is more than enough to explain why this movie is, well, bad. It's a movie about car thieves or something. It doesn't matter. It's clumsy, it's clunky, and it's apparent the film was helmed by someone just starting out. The cinematography and editing felt amateurish to me, probably because that's what they were. To be fair to the movie, you do see small hints and glimpses of the comedic flair that would blossom in his later work, but they are nowhere near substantial enough to carry the film. The only other thing worthy of note is that it stars Danielle Derieux, who was a relative newcomer at the time, but she would go on to have one of the longest and most illustrious careers in French cinema. Also, the musical score in the film wasn't half bad, which shouldn't be a surprise considering it was composed by Franz Waxman, the man behind the music of the Alfred Hitchcock classics Rebecca, Suspicion, and Rear Window. Ultimately, however, Mauvaise graine simply doesn't do anything to make itself stand out. It is easily the weakest film of Billy Wilder's catalog, and a title I see no reason for anyone but the most dedicated completionist to seek out. Number 25. Buddy Buddy. From his very first directed feature to his last, it's astonishing to see such a high-quality, well-respected, and legendary career be bookended by such duds.
It's an awful movie. It's really a disappointment coming from these people.
It's a mystery. I don't understand it.
This film was poorly written, poorly acted, unfunny, and just poorly executed as a whole. The story felt simple, yet convoluted at the same time, somehow. It's about an assassin played by Walter Matthau, who tries to eliminate his target, but a depressed man right next door to him at the hotel, played by Jack Lemmon, keeps interrupting his business by trying to off himself over and over. So he tries to get rid of him, Lemon's wife gets in the picture, Klaus Kinski has a small role here for some reason. The movie just wasn't that interesting, or, good. I mean, what the hell happened with the editing of this movie? There were several cuts in this film that were jarringly bad, hovering on a finished action half a second too long before finally cutting to the next shot. Just a mediocre editing job right here. Visually, the film doesn't do anything interesting or memorable, which is an issue that lingered over all of the films that Billy Wilder made late in his career. I mean, Billy Wilder was never renowned for his visuals specifically, but at his best, he was able to compose wonderful and beautiful frames, but that ability seemed to fade away over time, with Buddy Buddy being arguably his ugliest film. The performances were either really bad or really boring. Paula Prentice was especially bad here.
You've got to go with the flow.
Possibly the single worst performance I've seen in any Billy Wilder movie. Over the top, but without any comedic chops. It was embarrassing. The only remotely good thing I have to say about this film is the partnership between Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. Now, don't get me wrong, they were way off their best here. These two shared the screen together in two other Billy Wilder films prior to this one, and in both instances they were much better than they were here, but I will give them some credit. These two are so talented and so funny that even at their worst, they managed to generate a tiny bit of amusement here and there. And I did laugh during those rare instances, but this is due to them, not to Billy Wilder, who I am sad to say ended his legendary career on the worst low possible.
Up yours, Buster!
Number 24. The Emperor Waltz. Billy Wilder's first film in color was also his very first Hollywood misstep. It's a period romantic comedy musical film centered around a Lady and the Tramp-like relationship. You know, the woman is a high-class society royal and the man is a common salesman. The story is very focused on the class differences, and also, weirdly enough, very centered around their dogs. Damn, it's more like Lady and the Tramp than even I thought it was. Anyway, for those who know me, it's easy to understand why I didn't like this movie. In general, I'm not a big fan of musicals, I'm not a big fan of period films, and I'm not a big fan of dogs. So yeah, this movie didn't really speak to me. But I don't think the film is bad just because of my own personal biases. This film is one of Billy Wilder's weakest writing endeavors. The script felt less refined, more rough around the edges, and more prone to silly cliches. There were a ton of exposition dumps throughout the film, and even though this is far from the only Billy Wilder movie that is presented as a flashback narrated by characters in the present, in here the story structure didn't gel together well. Maybe it's because in this film the flashback is given to us through gossip from random nameless characters that have nothing to do with anything. I don't know. The point is, the writing here was far from Wilder's best. The performances were alright, nothing special. Bing Crosby was Bing Crosby. He was fine. And then there's Joanne Fontaine. She feels too good for this movie, honestly. She had nothing to work with here, a far cry from her brilliant performances in Hitchcock's Rebecca and Suspicion, and the rest of the cast didn't really bring anything to the table as well. The last thing I'll say about The Emperor Waltz is that for a comedy, it wasn't very funny. Most of the humor centered around Crosby's character being brash and loud and how the sophisticated, high-class people didn't know how to handle him. It got old rather quickly. But I will give some credit to the film. It had one funny element to it, which is how in some scenes you see random people just start to dance and also whip out an instrument and start playing. I swear, there's a scene where an entire town just starts playing together for no reason. That moment made me laugh. It was good. But the genuinely funny moments were few and far between. Other than the occasional chuckle, some nice scenery, and a sweet song or two, The Emperor Waltz didn't have much to offer, which is why it's ranked rather low on my list. Number 23. The Spirit of St. Louis. This is Billy Wilder's one and only biopic, and after seeing it, I can understand why he stopped making them. It tells the true story of Charles Lindbergh and his historic, non-stop 33-hour flight from New York to Paris. Now, there were some things that I did like here. I thought the music, once again by Franz Waxman, was bombastic and triumphant, and served its purpose well. My favorite part of the film was actually the middle, where we get to see the preparations before the flight, from building the plane itself, which is presented by a fairly good montage sequence, all the way to the mental preparations that Charles goes through. The film did a good job in conveying the magnitude of the task ahead, and how steep the odds are against him. And the build-up towards the takeoff itself was legitimately quite suspenseful and well executed. James Stewart did a solid job in the leading role. He makes you care for the character and you want to see him accomplish his goal. Unfortunately, the journey to reach said goal was paced horribly. This brings me to the negatives, which are plentiful. As I said, the pacing of the film is awful, with a troubling lack of energy and a distinct Wilder flair for the majority of the runtime. The first 40 minutes were slow and dull, with stagnant, sleep-inducing cinematography, and boring dialogue that felt more like it was written for a TV movie. But to its credit, the film does start to pick up in the middle, as I've mentioned. But then the plane takes off, and the film stalls. For the entirety of the film's final hour, we're stuck with Stewart on the plane, and as great as an actor he was, and he was great, even he wasn't able to carry an entire film all on his own, stuck in a tiny cockpit. So the film finds itself in desperate need to fill in the time. So we get the riveting scenes of James Stewart talking to a fly, James Stewart looking at the view, James Stewart trying not to fall asleep, and a big batch of flashbacks fleshing out his backstory, which would have been better served if they occurred at the beginning of the picture so we could, get to know the character better and care for him even more. But Billy Wilder made other choices, and in this rare instance, I think he got it wrong. The last thing I'll talk about are the special effects. Very briefly, the film was nominated for an Oscar for the effects, and I'm sure the visuals were very impressive at the time, but needless to say, time wasn't kind to this movie. The visuals simply don't hold up. Ultimately, The Spirit of St. Louis lacked most of what I love about Billy Wilder films, but the biggest thing it was missing was a hook. The film had no witty premise, zero creative set pieces, and zero scene-stealing performances whatsoever. All it had was a generic story that the film told straight, and not much else. The result is a Billy Wilder film that has aged very poorly. Number 22. Fedora. I'll give this film some credit. It's much more interesting than the films beneath it on the list, and it at least tries to explore some interesting ideas, but I think it fails in the execution. The film stars William Holden as a man who works in the movie business, who's down on his luck, who finds himself entangled with a reclusive and aging actress who used to be big and is desperate for attention, adoration, and validation. She wants to make another picture. Sorry, if that sounds like the plot to a different Billy Wilder movie, you'd be right. But it's also the plot of Fedora. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't shake the notion that Fedora is simply a newer version of Sunset Boulevard, only worse in every single aspect. William Holden wasn't at his best here. The rest of the performances were lackluster, the pacing of the film was way off, and choices were made with a story that I felt only hurt the film in the long run. I will say that at the very least, the first half of the film held my interest. We are presented with the central mystery of the film. Is Fedora insane? Has she lost her mind? Or is she under duress, being held captive against her will by some strange countess and her doctor? I tagged along for the beginning, wanting to find out what's going on, but without spoiling anything, the film takes a really sharp turn near the middle. We find out that Fedora was keeping a very dark secret, and at that very moment, the story was over. I'm not kidding. The entire second half of the movie is basically just a long stream of flashbacks explaining all of the backstory and the mystery that we experienced prior. The amount of exposition was so large, they should have called Basil Exposition from Austin Powers to handle it. Oh, here he is.
I wet my trousers.
But in all seriousness, I didn't think the flashbacks were done well. They were poorly written, poorly acted, and they just weren't that interesting. The most noteworthy moment was a Henry Fonda cameo playing himself. That's it. Ultimately, the film turned out to be an unpleasant watch. It tries really hard to recapture the magic of Sunset Boulevard, but instead of biting and relevant social satire, the film felt more like the petty whining of a miserable old man trying to cling on to past glory. I'm not saying that's what it was, I'm saying that's how it felt to me, okay? So even though I did appreciate that it tried to do something interesting, at the end of the day, Fedora wasn't my cup of tea. Number 21. Irma la Douce. This movie was silly as all hell. It tells a very convoluted and bizarre story about a recently fired police officer named Nestor, who finds himself falling in love with a street prostitute named Irma the Sweet. Not only that, after beating up her pimp in a surprisingly brutal yet admittedly hilarious fight scene, he becomes her new pimp. Scratch that, he becomes president of the pimps. Only instead of being controlling and domineering with Irma, he's portrayed more like a passive and feminine benefactor of Irma's provisions. In short, she's the breadwinner, he's the housewife. That alone is already strange enough, but it doesn't stop there. Because he's in love with Irma and he doesn't want her to sleep with other people for a living, he decides to pretend to be an English lord so he could give her a ton of money that she in turn can give back to him, only she doesn't know it's him, and he has to work his ass off himself to get the money in the first place, and, you know what? I'm not even gonna try to explain the plot to you. Irma la Douce was okay. It has some funny moments, the performances were pretty good, the musical score won an Academy Award, so there are some highlights to be found. My favorite thing about the movie, however, was actually the character of Mustache, played by Lou Jacobi. He's the first instance on this list of what I like to call the SSSC, the scene-stealing supporting character. He stole the show every time he was on screen, he was hilarious. But the problem with this movie is that it was too slow, too convoluted, and my most controversial take, too silly. The story is filled with misunderstandings between the characters trying to fool other characters in really stupid and over-the-top ways, and a bunch of contradicting character motivations and plot holes that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. I know that it's a comedy, and you don't need to take it seriously, but it's one of Billy Wilder's lousiest comedies in my opinion. I also felt like, similarly to Fedora, it was trying to capture the magic of previous Wilder films a bit too much. You have Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine, just like in The Apartment. Jack Lemmon gets scolded by his superior, just like in The Apartment. And he even catches a cold, just like in The Apartment. He pretends to be someone else, just like in Some Like It Hot. He finds himself stuck in a really small space with a bunch of women, just like in Some Like It Hot. You get the picture. Instead of capturing the same feel of those earlier, better movies, these elements just made me want to watch those other films instead. So Irma la Douce wasn't great, but I bet you will be at least somewhat entertained by this film. Sure, it's too long and it has a lot of repetitive scenes, a lot of slow scenes, and some boring scenes, but the good funny scenes were legitimately entertaining. And I did care about the two leads, which is another big plus. So at the end of the day, Irma la Douce isn't one of Billy Wilder's best films, but I wouldn't call it a bad movie either. Number 20. Avanti. Yet another case of a film that is probably 30 minutes too long. I preferred Avanti over Irma la Douce thanks to a more grounded story, some fairly likable characters, and some legitimately great laughs. The film starts off in a rather compelling fashion. It tells the story of Wendell Ambrister Jr., played, once again, by Jack Lemmon, who travels to Italy in order to retrieve the body of his deceased father who died in a car crash, only to discover that he wasn't alone in the car. Thanks to a strange woman that he meets on the way there, he realizes that his father died alongside his secret lover, who just so happens to be the strange woman's mother. The rest of the film sees him gradually bond with the woman, played by Juliet Mills, as he constantly tries to retrieve his father's corpse, which winds up being a much more complicated task than he originally thought. The opening 30 minutes were really engaging, thanks to the constant gathering of new information. All the while, it was very clear the hospitality was trying to hide something from him. Speaking of the hospitality, I freaking loved Carlo Carlucci in this film, played by Clive Reville, who also, randomly enough, supplied the original voice of the Emperor in The Empire Strikes Back.
There is a great disturbance in the Force.
Now, that's a fun fact if there ever was one. Back to Avanti, Clive Reville absolutely stole the show here. He's yet another case of a scene-stealing supporting character, just like Mustache from Irma la Douce, but I think I liked him even more. He had a bunch of great one-liners and zingers here, and the way he always tries his best to help out and take care of everything behind the scenes was very endearing. He was easily the best part of the film for me.
Carlucci, what would I do without you?
I have often wondered about that.
That's not to say the two leads were bad, far from it. I thought Jack Lemmon did a great job here as usual, and Juliet Mills was just as good, delivering a very likable performance. And, the fact that she looks great all over certainly doesn't hurt. Although this actually brings me to one of my issues with the film, which is that there's an entire shtick surrounding the notion that Juliet Mills' character is fat.
Because if you saw me, I'm short, I'm fat, and I'm not very attractive.
It's not just a one-time thing, it's a major aspect of her character. She keeps talking down to herself, making a big deal of how she's overweight and unattractive, and I don't see it. She looks fantastic, as you've probably already noticed. I guess it has to do with the societal norms of the day, but regardless of that, this is an element of the film that has aged very poorly. Another negative the film has is the aforementioned pacing issue. The film is 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and it definitely could have been trimmed. After a fairly fast-paced opening act and a legitimately touching scene at the morgue, the film starts going all over the place, and the pacing drags to a halt. The story goes in some unexpected directions, and there were some legitimately amusing moments here and there, but there were also some slow and needlessly repetitive moments as well, that probably should have been cut. Anyway, despite the film's flaws, at the end of the day, I enjoyed myself while watching the movie. Genuinely likable characters, some laughs, and a laid-back, light-hearted tone can go a long way, and Avanti takes advantage of those to deliver a movie that, while not great, I still quite liked.
Avanti.
Number 19. The Front Page. Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau team up once again in a Billy Wilder movie, this time a film based on the play of the same name, which has already inspired several other films in the past, including His Girl Friday. It tells the story of Hildy, played by Lemmon, a hotshot news reporter on the brink of getting married and quitting the business, only to get sucked back in by a juicy story about an escaped convict. Jack Lemmon, fresh off of his Best Actor Oscar win the year before, was great as usual. I'm starting to sense a pattern here. He was one of the few comedic performers who was just as good as playing the butt of the joke, as well as the guy laughing and making the jokes himself. Here he plays the latter, and it was nice to see him play a truly competent character for a change. Walter Matthau was great here. The guy can talk like a locomotive, full of confidence, might, and intent. He'll do whatever it takes to swindle you. Watching him talk and threaten his way out of sticky situations was very entertaining. The dialogue in general here was well written and well delivered. It was snappy, sharp, and fast-paced. There were even some effective character moments in the film. There's a scene where we see Hildy get into his writing so much that he doesn't even notice that his fiancée is threatening to leave him. That moment was really well done, and it speaks to how getting too zoned in on your profession or hobby can make you lose sight of what's really important. Really good stuff, movie. So there's plenty of upside to this film, but the downsides are, unfortunately, just as observable. The biggest issue I had with the film is that other than Lemmon and Matthau, and also the sheriff character played by Vincent Gardenia, who was entertaining as a bumbling idiot, none of the other characters really left much of an impact on me. You got the escaped convict, who was fine. You got his self-described $2 whore lover, who was okay. You got a bunch of other characters whose presence rarely leaves a mark. And worst of all, you have Hildy's fiancé, played by Susan Sarandon, who barely even registers as a character here. She does a good job in the one scene I mentioned earlier, but other than that, almost nothing. She felt more like a placeholder for other characters to play off of rather than her own character. Hell, I even found that weird doctor who gets shot in the balls way more memorable than her, and he's in the movie for like, what, a scene and a half? So there's a distinct lack of good characters in this movie. And also, I can't say that I got too emotionally involved with this film. But with that being said, the duo of Lemmon and Matthau did a very serviceable job carrying this movie on their own. And as a result, you get a genuinely fun, if slightly unremarkable, Billy Wilder comedy. Number 18. Love in the Afternoon. Love in the Afternoon stars Audrey Hepburn as the daughter of a private detective who falls in love with the primary subject of her father's investigations, a rich playboy who's much older than she is, played by Gary Cooper. This is actually a case of a film that starts off very slowly, but gradually picks up the pace and becomes much more enjoyable by the end. Most of my issues with the film are with the first half. Even though the film was lighthearted, quirky, and in-your-face comedic throughout its entirety, I'd be lying if I said that I was emotionally attached to what was going on, at least in the beginning. The biggest problem I had with the film is that I found the foundation of the main romance to be really weak. Gary Cooper plays a rich and good-looking man who likes sleeping with a ton of women, whether they're married or not. He doesn't have much to his character at first other than his charm, which is fine, but I hoped for more. He's attracted to Audrey Hepburn because she's young, attractive, and slightly mysterious. On the other hand, Audrey Hepburn's character finds herself madly attracted to him because he's hot, I guess. Maybe she's attracted to him because he's naughty or because he's forbidden fruit. After all, her father would not approve. But no matter the reason, the relationship comes off as more frustrating than romantic. He even forgets all about her when they meet again after a lengthy period of time, and she's still charmed by him. Really? Oh, by the way, that's Billy Wilder's actual wife going on a date with Gary Cooper. I'm not gonna get into that. Other than that issue, I also found the jokes to be rather hit or miss. Some of the jokes with this one husband who suspects his wife is cheating on him with Gary Cooper were pretty funny. But then there was also this strange lady with her dog. What was up with that? She kept hitting him and rubbing his face. It was unpleasant. I didn't like that. I know I said before I don't like dogs, but not to that extent, okay? Basically, it was hard for me to get into the film at first, but luckily, the film did get better. Audrey Hepburn becomes quite jealous of Gary Cooper's numerous sexual exploits, so she in turn pretends to have a history of lovers as well, in order to make Gary Cooper jealous. And strangely enough, it works, and the results were really entertaining. All of a sudden, I started having fun with the film, and I began noticing the film's strengths, like the lovely cinematography, the overall great performances by the rest of the cast, and best of all, the gypsies. Yeah, there's a band of gypsies that follow Gary Cooper around, and I loved them. They added some extra texture to the comedy by having some of the best laughs in the movie. One last thing I'd like to mention is Maurice Chevalier, who plays Audrey Hepburn's father. His casting was quite symbolic thanks to the well-known fact that Billy Wilder's favorite director was Ernst Lubitsch, who worked with Chevalier on multiple occasions. That connection doesn't factor into my personal opinions about the film, mind you. It's nice trivia for film buffs, but it doesn't affect the film itself in any way. I liked him here though. He was funny. Just keep him away from little girls, that's all. If you know, you know. Number 17. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. This was one of Billy Wilder's most straightforward films, but here I took it as a good thing. It's supposed to be a story about the real Sherlock Holmes, played by Robert Stevens, as he tries to solve a mystery with his trusty friend Dr. Watson, played by Colin Blakely, revolving around a mysterious woman who winds up on their doorstep and the disappearance of her husband. It's a pretty standard mystery film with some comedic elements to it, but it did have a few surprises in store for me. I mean, walking into this Sherlock Holmes film, I didn't expect to see the Loch Ness Monster, or Christopher Lee as Sherlock's brother Mycroft, or midgets, but that's exactly what I got. And honestly, these were really pleasant surprises. By the way, shout out to how Watson says midgets in this scene. That was great.
Midgets.
In the vast world of Sherlock Holmes film adaptations, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes is a very solid entry. The depictions of the two main characters weren't the greatest I've ever seen, but they were great for what they were. For example, I appreciate that Robert Stevens toned down the arrogance and the overconfidence that a fair few other Sherlock performances have way too much of. He has his genius moments, but he also introduced a layer of vulnerability and softness that really worked in the context of the film. And Colin Blakely as Watson was genuinely funny. Watching them interact with one another was definitely a joy. On an audio-visual level, I thought the film was pretty good as well. I liked the sets in the film, the costumes, and the Scottish backdrop. The main issue I did have with the movie is that the story wasn't that interesting. There is, of course, a mystery element to the film, and for the majority of the runtime it was fairly intriguing, but other than figuring out that Gabrielle wasn't all she claimed to be, the actual payoff for the whole ordeal didn't really amount to much by the end. It was fairly anticlimactic if you ask me. So what we're left with is not the most impressive or remarkable movie, but I liked the characters, I liked several of the jokes, and I liked the visuals and the music. So, as a whole, I found the film to be quite enjoyable. Number 16. Five Graves to Cairo. An early and rock-solid addition to Billy Wilder's repertoire, Five Graves to Cairo showcases a premise that starts simple but turns ever more complicated and is executed with undeniable proficiency. The story is set during World War II, and it follows a British soldier who finds himself stuck in a hotel of a war-torn town in Egypt that is overrun by Nazis. With the help of the hotel staff and in order to blend in, he pretends to be the hotel's waiter, who was killed prior to his arrival. But unbeknownst to him or to the rest of the staff, the dead waiter was actually a German spy the entire time. So now, the Nazis think he's the spy and that he's on their side. This leads to a film filled with secrecy, deception, twists, and turns. The film is very character-driven, and it manages to balance the more serious scenes with some light-hearted ones. On the one hand, you got a side plot involving the maid, played by Anne Baxter, who tries to strike a deal with one of the lieutenants in order to save her brother from captivity. On the other hand, though, you got some comic relief characters like the bumbling owner of the hotel, played by Akim Tamiroff, as well as an Italian general played by Fortunio Bonanova. But the main focus of the movie is on the undercover Corporal Bramble, played by Franchitone, who tries to keep his identity hidden from the intelligent and competent Field Marshal Rommel, played by Erich von Stroheim, and at the same time to solve the mystery of the Five Graves, which is code for the Nazis' secret strategy to conquer Cairo. It was fun to see the story progress and become more complicated and intriguing as it went along, and the mystery of the Five Graves was engaging. There's a great scene where Field Marshal Rommel answers questions from a bunch of imprisoned British generals, and we get to see how confident, professional, and courteous he is. He was a great villain, and Franchitone was equally great as the charismatic and resourceful hero. And Baxter was great as well as the emotional core of the film. All the characters were well written, and all the performances were great across the board. In short, Five Graves to Cairo was very good. It probably held more power during the time it was released, because of the World War II setting, but the film had intrigue, a bunch of twists that I didn't see coming, and a surprisingly bittersweet ending, with an emphasis on the bitter part. If you haven't seen this film yet, I recommend you check it out. Number 15. The Major and the Minor. Billy Wilder's very first Hollywood movie might not be his greatest or most memorable work, but The Major and the Minor might just be the most crucial film in his directing career. It could be argued that Ginger Rogers, of all people, was the catalyst for Billy Wilder's conquest of Hollywood. She was the one who vouched for him to land the directing job for the movie. And at that moment, the pressure was officially on. This film needed to be successful, and fortunately, all the pieces fell in place, and the rest is history. The Major and the Minor is a lovely little comedy that doesn't really do anything extraordinary, but it does do everything right. The film starts very simply with a very straightforward premise, following a woman named Sue Applegate who pretends to be a 12-year-old girl so she could get half-fare tickets for the train. But of course, in typical screwball comedy fashion, things quickly spiral out of control. She meets an army major named Kirby on the train, played by Ray Milland, and after a brief misunderstanding, he invites her to the military academy where he's stationed in order to clear things up. There she meets Kirby's overbearing fiancé, her unusually intelligent sister, and a bunch of other characters, all the while she needs to keep up with her facade. As I said, it's a very standard plot, and the concept of a character pretending to be something she's not is something Billy Wilder will revisit in future movies, as you've already seen, but here it's done quite well. I loved how the film managed to stay consistently entertaining and fun to watch by building on the core premise and introducing a bunch of funny and unique situations throughout the entire runtime. Ginger Rogers was great here. Her facial expressions were on point and her comedic timing was excellent. Billy Wilder even managed to sneak in a tap dancing scene as a callback to her musical endeavors of the 30s. Ray Milland was also really good here. Putting the awkwardness of him being slightly attracted to a person who he thinks is 12 aside for a second, Milland was really charming and likable here. Originally, Wilder wrote the role with Cary Grant in mind, and you can sort of see it here, but I think Milland managed to add a vulnerability to the character that made him more sympathetic and made the role truly his own. All the other characters were great as well, and the film was actually funny. In short, The Major and the Minor was a great first Hollywood directorial effort for Billy Wilder, and it signaled that great things were yet to come. Number 14. Sabrina. I bet there are some people who think this is too low of a placement, but I still really like this film. After all, when it comes to pure and unadulterated star power, it doesn't get much better than Billy Wilder's Sabrina, a film that stars both Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn, who are, according to the American Film Institute, the #1 ranked male movie star in history and the #1 ranked female movie star. Oh, wait, they ranked Katharine Hepburn #1. Well, I always preferred Audrey over Katharine anyway, so she might as well be at the top. In short, it stars these two Hollywood behemoths, and Wilder throws in William Holden in there for good measure, just to seal the deal. Both Audrey Hepburn and William Holden were fresh off of their big Oscar victories from the year before. Audrey Hepburn for Roman Holiday, and William Holden for, well, a film we'll get to later. So as you can see, the cast is full of A-listers, and a good thing too, because I don't think the film would have been anything too special if they were absent. The movie tells the story of Sabrina, a chauffeur's daughter who, after a 2-year stint in Paris and a very effective makeover, captures the eye of David, a member of a very wealthy business family, and the man Sabrina had a crush on all her life. But the family wants to marry David off to a different business family's daughter in order to secure a profitable merger. So David's older brother, Linus, spends time with Sabrina in order to keep her away from David and ultimately send her away completely. Just from this brief synopsis, you should already be guessing where the movie is going to go, and you'd be right. Don't get me wrong, Sabrina is a good movie, like most of Billy Wilder's movies, and I enjoyed myself while watching it. The performances were great. The characters were likable, the film is very well shot, and it had a bunch of genuinely funny moments in it. But it was also an instance of a relatively generic and basic script that was carried over the line by a star-studded cast. The glitz and glamour does a great job in hiding it, but the story and characters were really nothing to write home about. It was a story filled with tropes that I've already seen a million times in other films, and a very predictable and easily digestible plot. Ultimately, though, I still really enjoyed Sabrina. Even if this time, the enjoyment derived more from the stars on the screen than from Billy Wilder himself. Number 13. A Foreign Affair. We've reached the top half of the list. And if I thought the films up until now were good and enjoyable, then from here on out, I think the films are legitimately great and more than worth a watch. The first one of those great films is A Foreign Affair, one of Billy Wilder's most political films, set in Berlin after the end of the Second World War, centering around a love triangle between a US Army captain played by John Lund, a former Nazi who now works as a singer played by Marlene Dietrich, and the American congresswoman investigating her played by Jean Arthur. I'm actually gonna start with the negatives on this one. The biggest being the fact that the opening 30 minutes of the film were really slow. The film spends the majority of the opening half hour introducing the characters and setting up the environment for the story. But I thought it could have been done in a faster and sharper way. We tag along with a bunch of US government representatives on a tour of post-war Berlin, and we get to see the damage the city suffered. It's impressive how Billy Wilder actually shot on location in Berlin. The damage we see is real. But even though it was impressive and it adds a sense of place, ultimately it felt disconnected to the actual story, which is the true focus of the film. From the moment Jean Arthur ditches the group and joins a couple of rambunctious soldiers, that's where the story really gets going, and that's when I started to enjoy myself. The three main leads do an excellent job in the film. Marlene Dietrich was perfect as a seductive and opportunistic Erica. John Lund was charming and resourceful as Captain Pringle, but it was Jean Arthur who absolutely stole the show for me in this film.
Shouldn't we get permission?
Did we get permission to land in Normandy? Let's go.
She was fantastic as the headstrong and inquisitive Congresswoman Phoebe Frost, who started off very strict, professional, and driven, set in her intent to get that dastardly Erica behind bars. But as the film progresses, she lets her guard down and allows herself to let loose and fall head over heels for Pringle. My favorite scene in the movie is the scene where they kiss for the first time. That scene was funny and really sweet at the same time. The times when Phoebe allows herself to have fun are her best moments in the film. Of course, Captain Pringle has to hide his relationship with Erica from Phoebe. to pretend he doesn't even know her. But as you can imagine, things are never that simple. I think the story was fairly predictable, but it never bothered me. I really liked the characters here, especially Phoebe, and I was on for the ride. If the opening half hour was cut down and sped up, then this film would have been even higher on my list. But for what it is, it's a film that's both funny and engrossing, set during an interesting time and place in history with very likable and interesting characters. An easy recommendation for those who haven't seen it yet. Number 12. Kiss Me Stupid. If there are people that think I placed Sabrina too low, then I bet there are people that think I placed this one too high. But allow me to explain. I definitely have my issues with Kiss Me Stupid. I thought the foundation for the plot was extremely flimsy, built on really dumb character decisions and multiple plot conveniences. The main sequence of the film, where a failed musician brings home a prostitute to pretend to be his wife so that a famous and really horny musician who's stuck in their town will fondle her instead of his actual wife as he tries to sell him some of his songs, is crazy and ridiculous all on its own. But the way the film got there was even more so. But damn it if it wasn't funny. I laughed out loud on multiple occasions throughout this movie. The situations were so silly, the performances were so over the top, and the double entendres were so witty that I enjoyed myself almost every single minute. But more importantly than the comedy, I genuinely loved the characters here. I loved Orville Spooner, played by Ray Walston. The way he goes crazy every time another man looks at or even thinks of his wife, and how he constantly obsesses over the many ways his wife might be cheating on him was hilarious. I also loved his wife Zelda, played by Felicia Farr. Billy Wilder couldn't get Jack Lemmon for a change, so he cast his wife instead. Nice. Anyway, she was crazy about her husband and 100% faithful to him, even though she's way out of his league. Her husband had absolutely no reason to be worried, even a little bit. Which is actually the aforementioned flaw of the movie, that everything that happens in it and the way the story progresses is based on his baseless and unnecessary decisions. But in my opinion, the fact that the character was this stupid and I still loved him speaks volumes about the quality of the writing and the performance. I loved Orville's friend, Barney, played by Cliff Osmond, who was the scene-stealing supporting character of the film. And I loved Polly the Pistol, the prostitute Orville hires to play his wife. She's played by a totally transformed and unrecognizable Kim Novak, in a fantastic performance that I didn't see coming, full of charm, heart, and comedic timing. This is a completely different performance than the one she gave in Vertigo, which proves her worth as an actress. Even though she was brought there in order to handle a rich and handsome musician, she falls in love with Orville instead because of how sweet he is on the inside. That's actually my favorite part of the movie. I already stated that Zelda was out of Orville's league and how Orville was super jealous and dumb. So at the beginning, I legitimately asked myself, what the hell does she even see in him? But later in the film, he tells Polly about how he met Zelda and how he proposed to her, and then everything clicked. He actually is a catch, and Zelda's affection for him suddenly made sense. Of course, Polly falls for him too, as she sees the beauty and value of married life, and she develops a desire for it herself. I loved that about the film. It was way more heartfelt than I anticipated. So even though it does have some elements I don't like in it, or that I think were poorly done, at the end of the day, I found Kiss Me Stupid to be probably the most pleasant surprise in Billy Wilder's filmography. Number 11. The Fortune Cookie. Just missing out on the top 10 is The Fortune Cookie, the film that immediately followed up Kiss Me Stupid. The Fortune Cookie is the first of 3 Billy Wilder films to star the pairing of Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and it was easily their best showcase out of the 3. Hell, Walter Matthau actually won an Oscar for his performance here, which has got to be one of the greatest wins in Oscar history. The story is about a football cameraman named Harry, who gets hit by one of the football players by accident. Even though his condition is generally okay, his lawyer brother-in-law, Willie, convinces him to pretend that his injury is far more severe than it actually is in order to sue the insurance company for big money. Even though Harry disagrees at first, he sees this as an opportunity to get his estranged wife back, so he accepts. So now he has to go along with the ruse, all the while his conscience gradually starts to weigh on him. What makes this movie is, once again, the characters, with Willie being the undisputed star of the show.
Simple matter of negligence. That tarpaulin should have been rolled back 50 feet, and it's going to cost you $20,000 per foot.
I guess he's technically the SSSC, but he's in the film so much that he's practically a second main character. He was so entertaining here. He was determined, observant, quick on his feet, and a master of lies. He has all the tricks and none of the shame. A fantastic character and a fantastic performance. Jack Lemmon was, say it with me now, great as usual, delivering a performance that's both funny and thought-provoking. He wrestles with himself in the film, and it made the experience a much more intriguing one. I also liked the character of Boom Boom, the football player that hit Harry. Because he's under the impression that he seriously injured him, he feels the need to make it up to him by helping him out in any way he can, even to the detriment of his playing career. It leads him to some pretty dark places, which adds to Harry's burden. The film explores the themes of dependency and manipulation. Who is actually taking advantage of who in this movie? I love Billy Wilder's comedies, but when he writes a comedy that makes me think, with great characters, it gives the film extra points. As for negatives, there were a few. This is the only Billy Wilder movie that is told in chapters, but I honestly didn't feel like it added anything to the film. I felt like it could have ditched the whole chapters thing and it wouldn't have affected the movie at all, but that's just me. Also, there were a few scenes that didn't hit as hard as I wanted them to, but I'm getting into the realm of nitpicking at this point. The Fortune Cookie, in my opinion, isn't only a great film, it was the last great film Billy Wilder has ever made. And now, on to the top 10. Number 10. The 7-Year Itch. Also known as the movie with the most iconic Marilyn Monroe moment ever captured on film. Yeah, so the scene itself is fine. Not much to it. Doesn't really warrant the iconic status, so... The 7-Year Itch tells the story of a man, played by Tom Ewell, who's left alone at his house after his wife and son leave the city for the summer, only to discover that a young, playful, and sexy bombshell, played by Marilyn Monroe, has moved to the apartment above him for a limited time, and he struggles to remain faithful amidst his animalistic urges. Billy Wilder rather famously hated his own film, claiming it was a nothing movie and that it was made under straitjacketed conditions. Spoiler alert for the movie, I guess. Sorry about that, but it has to be said. In the play The 7-Year Itch, which the film is based on, the man does in fact cheat on his wife and sleeps with the girl. But in the movie, which was heavily restricted by the Hays Code, that was changed. He doesn't sleep with her and he remains faithful. Billy Wilder and George Axelrod, who co-wrote the film, hated this, claiming that while the guilt he feels after sleeping with her in the play is really funny, the guilt he feels in the movie is baseless because he doesn't do anything wrong, and thus it doesn't work. But on this rare occasion, I have to disagree with the creator. I found the guilt he feels in the movie to be totally understandable, as well as funny. He feels guilty because he wants to do it, because he constantly thinks about doing it, and he knows that it's wrong. I think that's a legitimate reason to feel guilty. And I gotta say, the fact that he actually does remain faithful throughout the movie, a few small kisses and a moment of weakness aside, made me like the character more than I would have if he did in fact cheat. Speaking of Tom Ewell, he won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, and he totally deserved that honor. He does a really great job here, but what makes it even more impressive is the fact that there are long stretches of the film where he's basically all alone in a room just talking to himself. This could have been boring, repetitive, and disastrous in the hands of a less capable actor, but Tom Ewell carries those scenes effortlessly and manages to be genuinely entertaining in the process. He deserves major kudos for his performance. Marilyn Monroe was absolutely gorgeous, and she plays the part perfectly. It's almost like she was genetically engineered in a lab to play this exact part in this exact film. It's the role she was born to play. But more than just being eye candy, she was also really entertaining and funny in the film. And watching the two interact on screen never got dull. But the real reason why this film works, in my opinion, is the fact that it's the only Billy Wilder film that feels like a modern movie. Visually, it's by far the most experimental and stylish film Billy Wilder's ever made. You have a bunch of fourth wall breaks, you have great use of pans and dissolves to show Tom's daydreaming, and probably my favorite editing moment in the entire film was this cut from a fantasy to a TV screen. It's way more creative and elaborate than any other Billy Wilder movie. Furthermore, there are a bunch of modern pop culture references in this film. Well, modern by 1955 standards. There are references to movies that were released just a year or two before this one, like From Here to Eternity, and even The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't know about you guys, but I thought that was really cool.
What blonde in the kitchen?
Wouldn't you like to know? Maybe it's Marilyn Monroe.
Sure, The 7-Year Itch is a very simple and surface-level movie at the end of the day, and there's not a whole lot of substance to it. But two great performances, a witty and humorous script, and relatively creative visuals make for a movie that I personally loved a hell of a lot more than the man who made it.
He was frothing at the mouth, just like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Number 9. 1, 2, 3. Holy smokes! I did not see this one coming. 1, 2, 3 was Billy Wilder's follow-up to The Apartment, arguably his most critically acclaimed work, so I was intrigued to see how he would follow it up. What I got was an absolutely roaring good time, a hilarious fast-paced comedy bursting with energy. I'm not kidding, this might just be Billy Wilder's most fast-paced and energetic film, and it was a total blast. The film is a political satire set in Berlin, just like A Foreign Affair, but instead of a romantic drama with comedic elements, this is just a straight-up, no-holds-barred, wacky comedy about Mac, a Coca-Cola company executive played by James Cagney who finds himself in a sticky situation. His boss's daughter, Scarlett, while visiting in Berlin, falls in love and marries a young East German communist named Otto and threatens to move with him to Moscow. Being a vehement capitalist, James Cagney predictably disapproves, and he must find a way to get out of the spickle before his boss finds out. Outside of the comedy, 1, 2, 3 doesn't have much going for it. But in this case, I'd say the comedy is all the film needed. The performances were really funny and they worked really well with each other. From James Cagney's loud and bombastic delivery to Pamela Tiffin's naive and childish turn as Scarlett, but I'd say that Horst Buchholz as Otto was the show stealer of this film. He was absolutely fantastic here as a wild, energetic, and enthusiastic anti-capitalist who totally believes in the communist cause. I loved how the film pokes fun at both sides equally, not holding any of its punches. The film manages to uncover the flaws in both systems in the most humorous way it can, mostly through excellent jokes and one-liners. I loved watching Mac and Otto duke it out. They look like they want to kill each other. All of the side characters were great as well. The story goes in wild and crazy directions, from Mac trying to put Otto in jail, to him trying to get him out of jail, and most hilariously of all, Mac trying to give Otto a capitalist makeover so that his boss will think his daughter married a Yankee supporter.
And this is my party membership. Oops, wrong party.
It's wacky, it's goofy, it's silly, but it's also witty and sharp. One of the most biting political satires ever written. The film is basically just one really funny and crazy scene after another, and I had a ton of fun with it. I don't really have many issues with the film, other than the fact that even though I enjoyed the movie, it didn't stick with me after the credits rolled, at least as much as some of Billy Wilder's other films. It's not a visual masterpiece, and the performances, while really funny, weren't anything too special. At the end of the day, it's just a comedy. It's a big, loud, fast, hilarious comedy, but it's just a comedy. So I couldn't in good faith rank it higher. But hey, for just a comedy, a top 10 finish is really impressive, and it's totally deserved. 1, 2, 3 is an amazingly good time with funny characters, great comedic performances, and hard-hitting jokes. It's a comedic goldmine. Number 8. The Lost Weekend, possibly the greatest film about alcohol ever made. It tells the story of a struggling alcoholic who goes through a weekend from hell. This is the first of 2 Billy Wilder films to win Best Picture, and his first of 2 Best Director wins as well. I've already made a video about this movie, so check it out if you want extended thoughts. I feel exactly the same way about the movie now as I did back then. It's a well-written, well-acted, and effective movie that showcases some great camera work and creative imagery for its time. Ray Milland was fantastic as a sympathetic yet pitiful alcoholic struggling with his addiction. He has some scenes in the film where he explains how the liquor makes him feel inside, and those scenes were genuinely captivating. He more than deserved his Best Actor Oscar win. Jane Wyman was the MVP of all girlfriends. She really should have dumped the guy years ago, but she sticks by him no matter what, and you can't help but get swept away by her devotion to him. I also have to give a shout out to his brother in the film, who also does his best to look after him and help him out. I love how the film is very intimate. It tells a very human story, and you really care about the souls involved. As for the negatives, I have only 2 issues with the movie, and they're very minor. The first is that even though the film is great, it doesn't really stand out as a Best Picture winner. My theory is that the Academy wanted to make amends about what they did to him the year before, so they gave him the Oscar for this movie as compensation. And the second issue I have is this bat. I mean, just look at it. It's awful. Anyway, I love The Lost Weekend. You can tell this film was made with great passion and care, with fantastic attention to detail. It's a fascinating journey to hell and back again that everyone should experience for themselves. By watching the movie, not in real life. Don't drink, you know what I mean. Number 7. Ace in the Hole. It's not often that you find a movie from the 50s that is more relevant today than it was when it came out, but Ace in the Hole is exactly that film. It tells the story of Chuck Tatum, played by Kirk Douglas, an ambitious newspaperman who stumbles upon an incident where a man named Leo is trapped in a cave after some rocks collapsed on him. After looking into it, he finds out that he could be freed relatively quickly and easily. But instead of reporting that, he twists the narrative to suit his own ends. He writes in the paper that it'll take a week to get him out, exaggerating the details in order to make the story read as tantalizingly as possible. And he convinces the authorities, the experts, and the relevant personnel to play along by promising to make them look real good in his writing. So Chuck runs the show and becomes a hotshot celebrity. But of course, and regrettably, things go exactly the way we expect them to go. This is one of, if not the most biting political satire that Billy Wilder has ever written, showcasing in 1951 the corruption and deception that nasty individuals from the media are capable of. The film serves as a warning that you shouldn't necessarily believe everything you see or read, and that even if some of the facts are indeed true, the way they're presented might have a certain nefarious agenda behind it. Chuck exemplifies this notion, and Kirk Douglas delivers a fantastic performance. He's opportunistic, selfish, and headstrong, justifying his actions by saying that he doesn't make anything happen, he just writes about it. He was a godless, shameless son of a bitch in this movie, and yet he's impossible not to like, due to his charisma and effortless charm. Also, the fact that he has a satisfying character arc certainly helps. The rest of the characters were great as well, and they all served their parts. From the bastard sheriff, only concerned with his re-election, all the way to Leo's wife, who we find out doesn't actually love her husband, so this new arrangement where he's out of her hair suits her quite nicely. But Chuck will have none of it, because he needs a worried and emotional wife for his story, so he forces her to act like she's suffering. The movie really hammers the point home. How a man is in a genuine life-threatening situation, but everyone around him isn't concerned about him at all. All they care about is their own personal gain. It's sickening, but it's also very compelling. Ace in the Hole is a fantastic film, filled with cynical politics and individuals taking advantage of a man in dire straits for their own personal benefits. It's a slow-motion train wreck, a carnival of fools, and one of the most engaging films Billy Wilder's ever made. Number 6. Stalag 17. This movie is a testament to Billy Wilder's brilliance. This man managed to take a story about prisoners of war, inject it with an insane amount of comedy, and yet somehow maintain the gravity and seriousness of the subject matter, thus ensuring that we still take the film seriously in lieu of all the silliness. I don't think people realize just how difficult it is to achieve such a feat, but Billy Wilder was a master of his craft. Stalag 17 is one of Billy Wilder's funniest comedies and one of his most serious dramas, all at the same time. God, I love competent filmmakers. The story is about a group of POWs in a Nazi prison camp during World War II, who suspect that one of their own is actually a secret German spy, so they try to figure out who the rat is. That's the basic plot in a nutshell, and the scenes that deal with the plot are engrossing. But what gives the film its heart are the scenes that don't move the story forward. The majority of the film is just the characters spending time with each other, going through their daily routines, trying to maintain their humanity in suboptimal conditions. The story takes a back seat and we get to just chill and hang out with them. And I loved those scenes a lot. These are the scenes where the characters get their chance to shine, and there are some really great ones here. William Holden plays the closest thing to a main character in this movie, J.J. Sefton. He was cool, he was smart, and he won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance. Other highlights were Frank Price, played by Peter Graves, who I always knew as Captain Over from Airplane.
You like movies about gladiators?
And Sergeant Schultz, who was actually one of the Nazis, but he had an entertaining, ball-busting relationship with the prisoners. I liked him a lot. Another Nazi I liked here was the head of the prison, who was played by Otto Preminger, who was a great director as well as an actor. He was a great antagonist and he served his part well. But my favorite characters in the film were the duo of Harry and Animal, who were basically the barracks clowns. I loved their hijinks and their antics. They had some of the best moments in the movie, and they made me laugh out loud multiple times. Definitely the show-stealing supporting characters of this film. They were really great. In short, Stalag 17 is a fantastic Billy Wilder movie. Funny and serious, lighthearted and suspenseful in equal measure. It's an easy recommendation. Oh, and it probably has the funniest Heil Hitler scene in any movie I've ever seen in my life. Number 5. Witness for the Prosecution. Welcome to the Charles Laughton Show. Witness for the Prosecution is one of my all-time favorite courtroom dramas, one of my favorite Agatha Christie film adaptations, and one of the best films Billy Wilder's ever made. It's an enthralling and captivating film from start to finish, with well-written dialogue, excellent pacing, and terrific performances, with one big, fat, cynical, cigar-smoking bloke being the best of the lot.
Are you not in fact a chronic and habitual liar?
That's right, Charles Laughton is the absolute GOAT. I freaking love this guy. This is just as much his movie as it is Wilder's. His no BS attitude, his thorough and aggressive questioning, and his constant berating of his nurse, played by his real-life spouse Elsa Lanchester, were a regular source of entertainment all throughout the runtime. Captain Bligh, take a bow. And kudos to the nurse for taking it all on the chin. The rest of the performances were great across the board, from the aforementioned Elsa Lanchester as the caring yet strict nurse, Tyrone Power in a non-characteristic role as a man accused of murdering an older wealthy woman in order to get her money, and Marlene Dietrich as the accused man's wife, who shockingly decides to testify against her husband, hence the title of the movie. Now, when it comes to the actual story, I need to make something clear. Usually when I talk about older movies, movies that are decades old, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., I don't mind delving into minor spoiler territory here and there. But with this film, I'm faced with a problem. Witness for the Prosecution is a film that I refuse to spoil. You really should watch this film without knowing much of anything about it, especially regarding its ending, which, without spoiling, pretty much changes the way you see everything that came before it. The ending was such a big deal when it came out, even the promotional material asked the viewers not to spoil it for their friends. As for me personally, I liked the ending, but I felt like it was a bit rushed and too over the top for its own good. And I really can't get into it more than that. I'm stuck. On the one hand, I don't want to talk about the more spoilery aspects of the movie, but on the other hand, these spoilery aspects shape a lot of how I feel about the film as a whole. So I guess the only thing I can say is you'll have to take my word for it. Witness for the Prosecution is a fantastic film, filled with intrigue, wit, banter, and puzzle pieces that keep falling into place one by one until the final big picture is shockingly clear. It's an easy choice to kick off the top 5 of this list. Well, folks, it has come to this. These last 4 films are arguably the 4 films that define who Billy Wilder was as a writer-director. The only question left is how do they compare to each other? And I'm about to give you my takes right now. This is it. 2 comedies, 2 film noirs. Let's do this. Number 4. Some Like It Hot. First one out of the barrel is a comedy, and one of the greatest of all time at that. This was the first Billy Wilder film I ever saw, and it was a great one to start with. You all know the story. 2 musicians from Chicago find themselves as unwanted witnesses of a gang shooting, so in order to get as far away from them as possible without being detected, they decide to dress up in drag, pretend to be women, and join a female-only band who are traveling to Miami, with one of the band members being the sexy and voluptuous Sugar Cane, played by Marilyn Monroe in what is probably her most iconic role. Some Like It Hot is probably, pound for pound, Billy Wilder's funniest film. The entire movie I was either laughing or just staring at the screen with a dumb smile on my face. I just couldn't help it. Billy Wilder really outdid himself with his comedic writing for this film. Every single scene in the film has a joke in it, be it a play on words, a funny performance, or even a visual joke, which were especially great here. But unlike a comedy like 1, 2, 3, here there was much more to appreciate besides the laughs. For example, the visuals of the film stood out in my opinion. We get to see some great camera work and editing here. My favorite example being the scene where both leads have completely different dates simultaneously, and the film decides to show the contrast through quick cuts on swish pans from side to side. It was really well done, as well as hilarious. That's the movie's core strength. It's just bursting with energy. The film is cracking, it's sexy, it's funny, it's a blast and a great time. Jack Lemmon delivered the best performance in the film by a mile. He showcased perfect comedic timing here. His facial expressions were hilarious. He was easily the best part of the film for me. Marilyn Monroe was, well, Marilyn Monroe. I know some people perceive her as just a pretty face, the dumb blonde. And you know what? Maybe she is just that. But even so, you can't deny her screen presence, her aura, and her charm. It doesn't happen often, but on rare occasions in cinema history, a person comes along that the camera simply loves. And the camera loved Marilyn Monroe, and so do I. As for this film's scene-stealing supporting character, that title has to go to Osgood Fielding III, played by Joey Brown.
Wowee!
He was great. His interactions with Jack Lemmon were hilarious, and he's responsible for the iconic final line that closes the film. So, Some Like It Hot is obviously a great film, one of Billy Wilder's best, but I do have a few minor gripes. For starters, I thought Tony Curtis was a slight weak spot for the film. Don't get me wrong, he was still really good here and I liked him, but I didn't like him as much as Lemmon or Monroe. Probably because he decides to totally mislead and bamboozle Monroe so he can get some action, which was a choice. Of course, the film plays their relationship strictly for laughs, just like it plays everything else in the film strictly for laughs. And that's another slight issue I had. I just wished there was a bit more to the film than just plain comedy. Maybe a more interesting story, or characters that would get me invested on an emotional level. I guess the film starts off interesting, with the duo being on the run and all that, but from the moment they turn into girls, the threat of the gangsters just goes away, and the feeling of danger and urgency goes away with it. Sure, near the end the threat comes back, but for the whole middle portion of the film, it was missing. Anyway, it doesn't matter, I'm nitpicking here. Even if the film wasn't deep or thought-provoking, it didn't need to be. What it needed to be was funny, sweet, creative, and just a good and fun time, and in all of those, Some Like It Hot more than delivers. It's extremely well written, it's iconic, it's memorable, and it deserves to be regarded as a comedy classic. Number 3. The Apartment. Oh man, the comedies crash out early. But when the quality is this ridiculously high, it doesn't matter that much where you ultimately land. Regardless of anything I say or think, The Apartment is an all-time comedy classic that has stood the test of time. This is the second Billy Wilder movie to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, and it also marks his second Oscar win for Best Director, and it was very well deserved. Again, I've already made a video about it, check it out if you want, so in here I'll keep it brief. The film is an absolute blast. It's well shot, well edited, the music is great, and the performances were fantastic across the board. Jack Lemmon gives what is probably his best ever performance as Baxter. Shirley MacLaine was equally fantastic as Fran. The premise of the film is an all-timer, a story about a man who lets his superiors use his apartment to bang their mistresses in order to get ahead in the company, not realizing that the big boss's mistress is actually the girl he has feelings for, is both hilarious and with the potential to be really touching, and The Apartment fulfills that potential with ease. Honestly, I don't think The Apartment has any discernible flaws, so I can just continue to wax lyrical on it. The side characters were great here. All of them were memorable and distinct, with great performances to back them up. My favorites were Ray Walston, who would follow it up with a great leading performance in Kiss Me Stupid, and Jack Crucian, who delivered an Academy Award-nominated performance as Jack Lemmon's neighbor, Dr. Dreyfus, who was also one of the biggest sources of the comedy here, other than Lemmon. They played off of one another really well. I loved how Dreyfus thought that Baxter was the one bedding all those broads, and Baxter, in return, decides to play along with the charade and pretend that he is, in fact, a huge player. As you can probably guess, the film has no shortage of funny situations, funny exchanges of dialogue, funny double entendres, but the real strength of the film is that it manages to balance out all of these laughs with a bunch of tremendously heartfelt moments as well, most of them involving Fran. That's what gives The Apartment the edge over Some Like It Hot for me. Because while the previous entry on my list is very funny and entertaining, but also very light on emotional investment, The Apartment has both laughs and emotions in spades. It's a triumph of writing and execution, and in my opinion, it is hands down the greatest comedy Billy Wilder has ever made. Oh boy. These last two films. Guys, I want you to understand that choosing between these two masterpieces was the hardest decision I've made so far in any of my ranking videos. And it doesn't really come close. I love both of these films equally. So deciding which one will top the list and which one will have to settle for the silver medal was agonizingly difficult. But at the end of the day, I had to choose. So I went with my heart. Number 2, Sunset Boulevard. A piece of me just died inside. But yeah, Sunset Boulevard is number 2 for me. By a hair's breadth. This is the ultimate example of meta filmmaking, a cutting satire and a scathing critique of Hollywood, unsurpassed to this day. This is probably the most intent-filled film Billy Wilder has ever made. The casting choices, the set design choices, the story choices, they're all directed by a shared goal to expose the dark underbelly of the film industry. And the film achieves said goal in mesmerizing fashion. But I don't care about any of that. To me, all of that is mere trivia. It's interesting, sure. It adds context to the making of the film, sure. It might even add a bit to the overall experience. But to me, the one thing that I care about more than anything else is if the film can stand on its own as a cinematic experience. Is the film worth watching without knowing all the little fun facts behind the scenes? Well, as you can probably tell by the film's placement on the list, the answer is absolutely yes. For starters, Sunset Boulevard is Billy Wilder's visual masterpiece. Norma's mansion is beautifully designed, the cinematography was smooth and fluid, while the lighting was sharp and expressive, with fantastic use of shadows. The story was intriguing throughout, and it takes a bunch of twists and turns along the way. But you know what? Enough beating around the bush. Sunset Boulevard is all about Gloria Swanson, possibly the single greatest performance in any Billy Wilder film.
You're Norma Desmond. Used to be in silent pictures. Used to be big.
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
Gloria Swanson and her character Norma Desmond mirror each other almost perfectly. Gloria was one of the great silent movie stars. As a matter of fact, she was nominated for Best Actress at the very first Academy Awards ceremony. After the silent era, her movie appearances became more and more rare, until finally, in 1950, she made her grand comeback to film in Sunset Boulevard, as a character who also wants to stage a grand comeback into the movies. However, unlike in real life, in the film, Norma is portrayed as a kooky recluse, a relic of a bygone era. Her character was utterly fascinating. On the one hand, she's insufferable, crazy, delusional, clingy, domineering, and emotionally manipulative. But damn, you just can't help but feel for her. She's a poor thing at the end of the day, a woman desperate for love and adoration. Which brings me to Billy Wilder's most common theme. The theme he explores in almost every single film he's made. What you've probably already noticed by now. The theme of deception. Billy Wilder really liked to explore this theme, and he did so through many different angles. Usually it's portrayed as a character pretending to be something he is not in order to fool somebody else. Sometimes he pretends to be a completely different person, while at other times his pretending is limited to hiding his true intentions regarding certain things. Billy Wilder used this theme and plot point in comedic ways and also in dramatic ways. So how is this theme explored in Sunset Boulevard? Well, what makes this film special is that the person doing the fooling and the person getting fooled are one and the same. That's right, Norma Desmond is fooling herself in this movie. Fooling herself into believing that people still care about her, that people are desperate to see her, that she's still relevant after all these years. She does so in a desperate attempt to maintain her sanity, but it ends up being a futile effort. It's as pathetic as it is poetic. It's masterful.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
So, why isn't Sunset Boulevard number 1 on my list? It's number 1 on every other Billy Wilder list on the internet, so why not mine? Well, there are 2 reasons. The first reason is that I'm a shameless contrarian doing this all for clicks. Gotcha, I'm kidding. All right. The first reason is the aforementioned satirical aspect. To put it simply, I care about this element of the film less than most other people do. I can't prove it, but I think that a major part of why this film is so praised is because of all the elements that accompany it behind the scenes. The parallel between Gloria and Norma, the fact that it's a critique of Hollywood, the cameos of Buster Keaton, Cecil B. DeMille, and others, etc., etc. I personally find all of these winks and nods to be nice and cool, but I don't put so much weight on them while I'm watching. The second reason why it's only number 2 is that, in my personal viewing experience, Norma Desmond overshadows the rest of the film in terms of quality. Basically what I'm saying is that the rest of the characters aren't as good. I'm not saying they're bad, because they're not. William Holden was a perfectly good protagonist stuck in a golden cage. Nancy Olsen was just fine as the ambitious young writer who slowly becomes fond of Holden. And Erich von Stroheim was suitably enigmatic as Norma's butler. They were good, some of them even great, but not nearly at the level of Norma Desmond. What I'm left with is another Vertigo or Godfather Part 2 situation, where the highs of the film are the highest the director has ever reached. But as a whole, because one element is so much stronger than the rest of the film, the overall experience ends up becoming ever so slightly uneven. And to me, that hurts the film, because I, personally, prefer films that value consistency and spread their quality evenly. But I feel like I'm nitpicking, so I'm gonna stop. At the end of the day, Sunset Boulevard is an undeniable masterpiece, the ultimate story of delusion and ambition, with one of the most fascinating characters in movie history. The film is very well structured, it's intriguing throughout, and it has what is probably the best ending of all of Billy Wilder's films. Sunset Boulevard is a magnificent motion picture, no doubt, but there's still one other that I prefer just a tiny bit more. And you already know what it is. So let's get to it. Number 1, Double Indemnity. In my opinion, the quintessential film noir masterpiece. This film absolutely captivated me. It put me under its evil spell, and it didn't let me go until the very end. The story of an insurance salesman conspiring with a seductive housewife to murder her husband and take the insurance money was incredibly enthralling, way more than I thought it would. But from the moment I saw Phyllis Dietrichson at the top of the stairs looking down at the camera, I was completely and utterly hooked, just like Walter Neff. Now, you don't need me to tell you that this film is great. On a technical level, it's flawless, and just so happens it was stylistically right up my alley. I adored the brooding and thick atmosphere, the use of light and shadows, the terrific cinematography, and the moody musical score. Billy Wilder has written a near-perfect script that is one of the sharpest I've ever seen. The pacing is lightning quick, without a single dull moment in sight. But all of that is to be expected at this point. It's basically a given. What I can tell you is why I put this film at number 1 specifically. And the best way for me to do that is to explain why I put it above Sunset Boulevard, which is easily its closest competition. Well, the reason why I personally prefer Double Indemnity is that Sunset Boulevard felt to me like it was focusing more on unique individuals and their own personal stories, while Double Indemnity focused more on relationships between people. While Sunset Boulevard was a story about personal ambition, identity, and self-delusion, Double Indemnity was a story of exploitation, manipulation, forbidden love, but also about friendship. Now, of course, Sunset Boulevard deals with the relationships between the characters as well, and Double Indemnity fleshes out its own characters and spends some time focusing on them individually. But at the end of the day, Sunset Boulevard centers around the individual, while Double Indemnity centers around relationships, in my eyes. To each their own, of course, but I myself find the themes Double Indemnity explores just a tad more fascinating. And that's not the only reason why Double Indemnity is king. The second reason is that it has my favorite collection of characters out of any Billy Wilder film. While Sunset Boulevard has Joe Gillis, Betty Schaefer, Max von Mayerling, and of course Norma Desmond, all of whom are great characters which I adore. Double Indemnity has Barton Keyes, guys. It has Barton Keyes, played by Edward G. Robinson, the sharp, fast-talking, observant, headstrong, and just flat-out awesome claims manager who steals the show every time he's on screen. He was my personal favorite show-stealing supporting character out of any of Billy Wilder's films, hands down. Double Indemnity also has Phyllis Dietrichson, the #1 greatest and most iconic femme fatale in cinema history, played by Barbara Stanwyck. And of course, Walter Neff, the leading man, the glue that connects all the film together, played by Fred MacMurray in a career-defining performance. These three characters are some of the best characters ever written, but seeing them interact with one another is what makes this movie for me. Watching Walter flirt with Phyllis, watching Phyllis seduce Walter, watching Walter trying to fool Keyes even though he loves him. It's top-class drama clothed in tragedy and wickedness. Speaking of wickedness, Double Indemnity is one of the most sinister motion pictures I've ever seen. Watching Walter and Phyllis plan, plot out, and execute the murder of Phyllis's husband made me feel like an accomplice. Usually when I see nefarious deeds being committed on screen, I feel disconnected from the act itself. But Double Indemnity made me feel something I almost never feel while I'm watching a film. It made me feel guilty. I loved how this film challenged my ethics and my principles as I found myself strangely connecting with bad people committing acts of pure evil. Needless to say, it's a film that captured me in a way very few other films can manage. In short, Double Indemnity was incredible. It fascinated me with its themes, it captivated me with its characters. It was emotionally riveting, morally thought-provoking, with great performances, some of the best narration I've ever seen in a film, a fantastic opening that hooked me instantly, an ever-evolving story filled with intrigue that goes to unexpected places, and a 10 out of 10 perfect ending that closes the chapter on my personal favorite Billy Wilder film of all time.
Straight down the line for both of us. Remember?
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Now it's your turn. How do you rank Billy Wilder's filmography? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know which ranking video you'd like to see me do next. I'm always interested in hearing your suggestions. Again, thank you all so much, and have a good one.